People with COVID-19 may feel sick in lots of different ways. If you don't feel well, it's important to tell your parent or a grown-up. You should not come to school. If you're already at school and you start to feel sick, tell your teacher or the school nurse right away. It's okay to say you're not feeling well, and it's important to tell someone so we all can stay safe. If your grown-up has more questions about COVID-19, visit health.mn.gov.
Since 2011, Internet Essentials from Comcast has connected more than 10 million low-income Americans to low-cost, high-speed internet at home. From the beginning, we've designed our program to address the main barriers to broadband adoption head-on, from lack of digital skills to not having functional equipment, to the cost of a monthly service subscription. We provide important resources, such as free digital skills training, low-cost computers, and affordable high-speed internet for under $10 a month. We're also on our way to converting 1,000 community centers into Wi-Fi connected lift zones by the end of this year. Whether at home or on the go, we're on a mission to connect even more people in need, including students, families, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. That's why we've committed $1 billion over the next 10 years to reach 50 million people with the education, tools, and resources they need to succeed in a digital world.
Hello and welcome to MSR Talks. I'm your host, Stefanetta Harmon, and tonight we're talking digital equity. Having worked in the digital media space for the past 15 years, I've seen that conversations around awareness, access, literacy tend to be giant elephants in the room. We all know we need them, right? But we're not all sure how to get them. And the playing field needs to be leveled when it comes to not just having access to Wi-Fi and mobile phones, but also for computers, high-speed internet, software, and how to use them all. Now, all of these things can help improve your quality of schoolwork, make it easier to access resources, get higher paying jobs, or even just connect with family and friends. Now, I know digital equity and inclusion have become major buzzwords, but there's real work being done around them, especially in Minnesota. So I'm excited to explore this conversation with Suzanne Burks. She's Executive Director of Phyllis Wheatley, and Eric Nesheim, Executive Director of Literacy Minnesota. And they have both made digital equity a focus of their work and their organizations, whether through education and training or advocacy and community building. So I just want to say welcome.
Well, welcome, Suzanne and Eric. Thank you so much for joining this conversation today on digital equity. Super excited to have you and super excited to really dive into what it all means, right? We often hear, when we think of digital equity, we hear digital divide, digital inclusion, digital redlining. How do we really approach this conversation in a way that makes sense to folks?
Mm-hmm. Eric, you want to go first, and then I'll follow you.
Sure. I'll start. We're sort of coming from a little more big picture. My agency is Literacy Minnesota, statewide organization that does a lot of work with digital literacy as one of the literacy pieces that we do. And this is a topic that's been growing over the last decade. I don't think people even noticed it as much maybe until the pandemic, just how big a divide we're really up against when it comes to this digital divide that we're talking about. From our perspective, we deal with literacy, and that oftentimes to people means English as a second language, GED preparation, getting ready for school. Those are the types of things. We've been running across more and more people who have lost their job or want to go back to work and don't have the digital skills to do it, because nowadays 80% of jobs require some kind of digital skills, and a good third of the population doesn't have those skills. Mm-hmm. So more and more you're starting to see, and that number 80% is just growing. And so as you see, almost any job, including parent, having to go to school online with their kid, or having to go on the portal for their health care, or filling your bus card, everything requires some kind of digital skills nowadays. And so we're seeing more and more this gulf between the people who have those skills and the people who don't have those skills. And that's what that divide is. And I think during the pandemic, what we've seen is it's turned into essentially a canyon. And so, the idea that, everybody should have a device, everybody should have access to the internet, and everybody should have the skills, that's what we call the three-legged stool, would be the perfect world. And we are not in a perfect world.
Okay. So
Yeah, and you ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I would just add to that. One of the things we decided to do when I came on board about a year ago now at Phyllis Wheatley Community Center is to focus on digital literacy. And that starts with even our preschool, our toddlers and everybody at Mary T. Welcome, but all the way up to adults. And so, we really are now intentional about it. But, to Eric's point, one of the things that we've certainly found with COVID is that, some parents didn't even have cable or internet. Their kids didn't have Chromebooks or computers. There was no computer at home. And so a lot of the online education that was going on, they weren't able to really take advantage of that. And so we also are a NAS partner, Northside Achievement Zone. And so they were able to provide a lot of our families with some of the Chromebooks. And so we've really tried to work hard to try to help those families figure out how they're going to continue to educate their children, but also the parents themselves, because as Eric mentioned, a lot of them lost their jobs and they didn't have those kind of skills that they could get online or, apply for some of the jobs that weren't frontline workers, right? The essential workers. A lot of them were, at least in our community, they were essential workers. And so we've had to really kind of rethink how we're supporting those families. And then some of the programming that we've been offering is really focused on, ensuring that people have some of the basic digital skills, as well as then starting to move up the ladder, so to speak, to ensure that they are able to get certifications in order to get really good paying jobs. So we're kind of seeing the gamut.
Yeah. And, just to add to that, there's all kinds of opportunities out there. If you have these skills, they're calling this the jobs gap, the opportunities gap, right? So there's jobs open and there's people without jobs, but the issue is that the skills are not there to take those jobs and to get those jobs. And so there's a growing number of organizations working on what Suzanne is working on, trying to get people prepared for this new world. Not enough resources to do it. I'm a big critic of what we've been doing here in Minnesota, honestly. We've found that Minnesota, we often fancy ourselves cutting edge on all these different things,
right.
Education, right? Well, with digital literacy, we're in the bottom, 20% in terms of how our state is handling this, right? And so, we're behind Hawaii and Alaska and Louisiana on how we're handling our digital literacy situation here.
Right.
And partly I think that is because, you guys are from here. This is, we have, the good thing about Minnesota is that we have local control. And the bad thing about Minnesota is that we have local control. And so nobody is taking charge of this overall and having, that statewide conversation about how do we handle this growing challenge of digital equity, digital divide. And, there's isolated places that are doing great work, but as a state, we have some work to do. And that's going to require all of us to be part of this conversation, which is why I'm glad that we're having this conversation. So people sort of hear that this is actually a concern.
You know what, you just brought up something so important that, I just go back to, even when Obama was in office and now with Biden, one of the things that Obama did was he appointed a chief technology officer. And so, what, I'm just wondering, is there not one for the state of Minnesota? Because that would make perfect sense, right? Is to have, someone that's like a chief technology officer that would, part of their responsibility would be to focus on digital literacy.
Right.
Because of such of the importance of it, right? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times that sort of thing runs through the Department of Economic Development here in Minnesota. That's what, the governor's relying upon that group. And honestly, the good thing is that there should be literally tons of money coming now because of the ARPA, the federal funding that's coming down through the state, tons of money coming down. And I think the biggest question is going to be, how is that money going to be spent? And I don't doubt that it'll be spent in good ways on housing and different things like that. But this is important, and I have my concerns that we haven't jumped on this as a state, and we haven't been planning around this. And so I'm thinking that the solution might be just buy a bunch of computers and start passing them out, and that's really not a solution. There's many bigger issues than just passing out computers to people who don't know how to use them or who don't have access, right?
Who can't even get Microsoft Word or whatever it is, because now everything's on cost.
Right.
What I'm loving right now are two people who have not been introduced prior to this conversation. You're both in the space of literacy, education, equity, and they're two people in a room who are talking and having those ideas for movement. And I think
we appreciate you bringing us together.
And we
absolutely.
need to see more of that. I think when you're talking about like what's going to happen next, it has to involve people like you and the work that you're doing at Phyllis Wheatley, Suzanne, and Eric at Literacy Minnesota. How you have the people who are on the front lines every day, working with the community to help them move forward, and seeing how those challenges are impacting their everyday. Like you talked about the jobs and not being able to access work, or not being able to even get onto the education platform when we've been at home during the pandemic. Those are the things that I'm seeing just right now from the conversation. If you're in the room, then you can impact change. And so as people are watching this, I want you guys to also think the same thing. If you can get into the space and start participating in the conversation, you can begin to impact and affect change. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you're running into people who make decisions, lawmakers, if people feel like getting involved in legislative processes, this is a really good topic to start bringing up. This is an important topic, and that's how you get change in these areas, is by really pressuring. These are the issues that our community is struggling with. This is our future. We can't just let this go.
And Eric, I love the fact that you're bringing that up. One of the things that we're going to be doing now at Phyllis Wheatley is really fully re-engaging again in community. Because I have this idea that we need to reimagine community. What does that mean? And what's the responsibility, right? So to your point about elected officials, well, we'll host some of the candidate forums now coming up because it's an election year with our city council and the mayor and so forth. Well, we need to understand, in our respective communities, what are they doing? I mean, really, what are they doing? And not have it be so disjointed. And that's what it feels like to me. It's truly just disjointed where, the city's doing one thing, maybe the county's doing something else, and then you got the state doing this. And then, Minnesota's great to have, all the different councils, the Met Council, and all these different things. But how are they all really working together? And then, strategizing together, and then following the funding together, so it makes sense that you have a bigger impact versus one-off grants here, one-off investment there, where it really is, significant investment to make a major impact, both short-term and longer term. And that's what I think the community is looking for, is to say, to your point about, well, it's nice to give us a computer, and that's important. I don't want to.
It's one piece.
Yeah. But if they don't have internet, and if they don't know how to use it, nobody's educating them on how to use it. And I think you mentioned that as well. So what good does it do? Now, their children may know how to use some of it,
right? But
the parents that may not have a job may not know how to use it. And sometimes it's their pride that they don't want to say, I don't really know.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me. We have a site where I actually tutor. Before COVID, I tutored, for years, helping people learn about digital literacy, helping them go through how to use the internet, how do you use Word, how do you get an email address, all that sort of stuff. And you'd be surprised who would walk in those doors. It wasn't the normal crowd that you'd see. Oftentimes people who walk through those doors were what we would normally have called fully literate people, right? But they didn't have these skills, and they were, whether they were, nervous to admit it or not, I don't know, but they knew they needed them. And so they came and they could get them. There's ways to do it. I don't think there's enough resources, but there's ways ways to do it, and people are asking for it. But I think the point is it's a different looking population than I think you'd expect.
And it's not aged out. You have millennials.
No.
Millennials, 25-year-olds who can't figure, wait, what? But didn't you have this in school? So there's that part of the conversation too. And I want to, because you're talking about that, how it looks different, right? We talk so much about how it's this idea of access to mobile phones, right? Because these phones are mini computers. It's what 95, anywhere from 79 to 93% are what we're hearing for access, right? From even like low income populations, but they're not computers. So someone who is very astute or adept at working on a Galaxy and iPhone, if you put a Chromebook or a MacBook in front of them,
they wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know it. Yeah.
That's a different story.
It's a different, So how do we broach that part of the conversation? Because in their minds, well, I have a computer, I check my email on my phone. I can go to Google Docs or Microsoft, like what the office pieces and get everything together. How do you then have the conversation that even instills the importance of the computer at this point? Because everything is being pitched as you don't need a computer.
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think people are finding it out the hard way. They're finding out when they're looking for jobs, and they're finding out when they're running up against, trying to figure out their healthcare stuff. All of a sudden you realize that you need this screen in front of you to do this work, and everything's kind of built around. I would say that a lot of more things are being built around mobile now, which is probably okay, but in most jobs, people are still using full screens, and that's what's expected. So I think people are finding out the difficult way that's what's needed. We need to do, what Suzanne and Phyllis Wheatley is doing, is get to people when they're young and keep at it and keep working on them and make sure that they have access to these technologies through adult basic education programs, through, middle school programs, through whatever programs we can get to people to make sure that they have those skills before it's too late, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the one thing that we've also learned is that you got to do it's a two-prong approach, right? So you got to get with the kids early, but you got to bring their parents along at the same time almost. And so that's kind of what we've been trying to do, is bring their parents along, and sometimes kicking and screaming, but we want to bring them along to say, we can provide this support to you. So either you can get a better job if you even have one, or if you don't have one, you can earn, get these skills and certifications that will help you get a really good job. And then one of the programs that we instituted most recently, and it seems like it's a simple thing, right? And it's now young adults, well, I say adults, but kids between the ages of 14 and 19. And we call it Wheatley. It's an esports club. And we turned one of our conference rooms into a gaming room. And the reason why we did that, and we have a full curriculum around it. I had a client when I did a lot of work in diversity and inclusion, Northrop Grumman, and it's a major defense contractor. This is a contractor was in Torrance, California. And we went in there to have our initial tour and discussion with them. They took us into a simulated war room. I'll never forget this as long as I live. Whoa. And what were they doing? They were playing like a video game.
All right.
And I asked them, I said, what's the qualifications? And they told me it was like minimal qualifications. I said, well, what's the base salary? $65,000. Now, this was about 10 years ago. So when I was, applying for this and going through the interviewing process, I said, well, we got to focus on, digital literacy. I kind of said, we got to put our stake there. But what within that makes sense. And part of that is because they're already playing the video games. But what they don't understand is, what are they learning while they're playing? What are they learning? Strategy, logistics, right? Teamwork, or, taking risks, maybe moderately or not. So they're learning a lot of things that they don't even understand that they're learning, that could even get them to the point of working at a Northrop Grumman. Because that's when I saw that, I was just amazed. I said, this is like a big video game. Now, you could put aside your feelings about, working for a defense contractor and, participating in those activities. But the bottom line is those are options for them. The other part of why we wanted to do this is that right now they can compete for in tournaments and make money for themselves and their families. Mm. And if they do well, they can then earn scholarships to go to college. Mm-hmm. And we're developing relationships now through a partner where there are about 7 or 8 HBCUs that are now offering, esports gaming degrees and offering teams like they would football or basketball. And we plan to connect with the Timberwolves because they have an gaming team. So you see how kind of the pieces fit together. But if the young people and their parents don't understand how they do that, how they fit together, they would have just assumed, okay, my kid's playing video games and I don't want him to play or her to play anymore.
Right.
But if we can explain to them the reason why it might make sense is because there really are opportunities. And by the way, they can create their own video games and sell it.
And that comes back to equity and the inclusion piece about not just knowing that you wouldn't even know that because you don't have the access to it, right? You have to see someone. When you saw it 10 years ago, you were like, I never knew this. So now you're introducing kids to have the access to it. You are creating an environment where it shows you need a computer, right? You need Wi-Fi, internet access. This is not like those games you can't play on your phone. Those games have mechanical keyboards that people have purchased. Like it's a whole thing. It's a whole.
Well, they can build their computers. Most of them, and we're offering a program where they can build a gaming computer. It's not a regular computer.
No,
it's a game.
That's just brilliant. I mean, that's all brilliant because what you're doing is you're giving people those skills of building a computer. They're excited about it. They're happy to build that computer, and they're learning how to build a computer. And on top of that, then they're probably sitting there trying to figure out how do I develop a game because I want to make my own game. And those are all skills that whole concept of doing what people think is fun and having that be work. Why not? What the heck? Let's do it. If it's going to work, let's go for it.
Right. And to your point too, Eric, part of the digital literacy in our mind too is digital design, graphic design, creative writing, marketing, all those elements that go into, in this particular case, obviously it's the video games that I'm referring to, but it's all online.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some, if you do illustration, that might be, outside of that, but you've got to usually most of this is all online. It's digital, from that perspective. And if you don't understand even how to use a mouse, for goodness sake, what, or a pen, electronic pen, on a tablet.
I mean, look at what happened during COVID, right? The people who were on one side of the digital divide could go home and do work on their computers. The people on the other side of the digital divide had to go in and expose themselves to COVID every day, right?
Yep, exactly.
And, and that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have to be thinking that way. We should be able to, why would that be? But here we are. I mean, that's why that gulf grew. And, and the pandemic, it changed because of it, essentially.
Right.
But, too, even if they had a computer, what we learned is if they're in an apartment complex, the whole internet was so important because oftentimes they didn't have the right kind of bandwidth in those apartments in order to do anything online. So and by the way, if they had multiple people in their home that were trying to either do schoolwork and or work
or Zoom,
then that wasn't enough. And so they were limited to be able to even do any of that because there wasn't bandwidth. So the whole issue of broadband becomes even more important.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. And, people think that that's a greater Minnesota issue that out in that there's these, and it's absolutely true. Out in greater Minnesota, there's lots of gaps, but I don't think people realize in the metro just how many dark spots there are and how low a bandwidth you have in those apartment complexes, for example. I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, one of our staff persons, she, for a minute we worked from home and for about a month or something like that. And she would constantly get dropped from our, Zoom calls at that time, we've tried to transition to Microsoft Teams. But anyway, she constantly would get dropped off and we kept saying, what is going on? It was bandwidth in her building.
Right. Yeah. And those are the things that all of this money that's coming down from the federal government through our legislature should be handling. The bandwidth issues, the education issues, even the device issues should all be handled through those resources. So I think it's important that people know that, because our legislature this coming session is going to be making big decisions about what happens with that money.
Okay, so don't let me get started on that piece. Okay,
wait. How can folks get in on that? Look, this conversation is great.
Okay, so let me just tell you. Okay, because we're starting to really there's so much to unpack there. So I used to do government relations, not only for General Mills, but other clients after I left General Mills. And I did a lot of work on Capitol Hill in DC. The bottom line is, if you don't know these legislators, I don't care if they're federal or state, you're not going to get that money. However, a lot of nonprofits, the leaders don't believe that they should be lobbying or have a lobbying firm lobby on their behalf or advocate on their behalf. There's no rules. There's no rules that say that they can't.
Right.
Okay, so but the other part of that is a lot of the Black-led legacy organizations have typically not done that. And so as a result, they've not usually been included. But I think we have more, leaders now that understand kind of the, how things work, which is important to do. But there's no reason. If we don't get in line for that money now, if we don't line up for it, we are not going to get it. And I'm talking about serious money.
No, it's serious money. I mean, and I think you're right about a lot of nonprofits not understanding that the rules around lobbying and advocacy. I mean, most of what nonprofits do is advocacy. It's education. It's not really lobbying. A very small percentage is actual lobbying, where you're working on a bill, for example, right? And nonprofits are allowed to do that up to a fairly high threshold, actually, without it ever affecting them. But I do think it's a little scary, and it's a little confusing, probably. And if you don't have, good help, like a lobbyist, for example, it's really hard. It's hard to do. One of the things that we're working on right now is, with the help of, Comcast, essentially, and some other partners, we're looking at trying to get some kind of a digital navigation project going that would help people, hopefully statewide, where there would be resources flowing to community programs, for example, like Phyllis Wheatley, where you would have resources, hopefully, to pay for people to help with digital navigation. And digital navigation is essentially helping people have access to devices and figure out how to use them and the skills that come along with that, right? And as part of that project, we'd like there to be training for those people and some kind of ongoing support and resources for that crowd. And then they'd be out in all the different agencies doing this work. And I think it would be great if we could get something like that through the legislature. A lot of it has to do with education. And I think a lot of what they're going to be doing is broadband and devices. And so we really have to keep putting the pressure on about how that's going to come down, where it's going to go, thinking about this from a statewide perspective, like you mentioned. So it's not disorganized. And so Hennepin County isn't doing one thing, Ramsey another thing, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Anoka doing something else, which is what we kind of have right now.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, where I love the idea, the concept, I think that would be really strong. But like anything, it's the will to do it. There's money.
Right.
I mean, Minnesota's a rich state in so many ways, right? And I've lived in, about 7 states now. And, coming back, I'm just like, Minnesota is still a rich state, but it's the will to do it. In my mind, there's no reason why we can't do it.
Right. No, I agree. I think you're right. Honestly, again, not to point fingers, but we have, our economic development department, DEED. The guy in charge is a Google guy. They brought him in from Google. He understands technology. He understands that this is a jobs issue. A lot of this, right? So we should be really pressuring that group as well. If funding starts to flow through them, that this is what the communities need.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money. There's a lot of need. Let's match that up. Let's make sure people are getting the skills they need to get the jobs that we keep talking about being unfulfilled.
Well, I have some good news that I can now publicly share.
Okay.
We were one of 4 organizations in the state to receive a deed grant, and for, you know, the skill building and job placement.
Nice.
Comcast agreed to be one of our corporate partners, so that as we're training them in the basic skills, that they then would consider those that graduate and, you know, look to place them in their organization. We had Comcast, Medtronic, and Microsoft. And so, you know, we weren't sure. I mean, it's statewide. There was a lot of, you know, organizations. I think they said they had 5 million in requests, and they only had $925,000 to give out. So, I mean, we were really fortunate in that. But we leveraged Microsoft's initial investment in us around their community skills program, which is basic skills, computer skills training, all the way up to their major certifications. And so we leveraged that in trying to get deed and a couple other, you know, opportunities that, you know, we're looking at for our Digital TechWorks Academy, kind of all that's underneath there. And we were just now announced it. Yeah. And to your point, we're going to work hard.
Yeah, that's what they should be doing. And you're doing the right thing, keeping in there and making sure you keep those contacts hot.
Yeah.
And how did Comcast, because I know this is part of Comcast conversation, right? Too. So you're also a lift zone?
We're a lift zone.
What does that mean?
So what they did is they came in. We had our Wi-Fi, it was spotty at best.
So
and they said,
they
came in and they upgraded all of that. So they expanded our bandwidth so that we can have our, you know, gaming room now. We can have all of our staff to be able to access the Wi-Fi. And if we have multiple people in our multi-purpose room, you know, like 20 people on a computer, and we got 20, you know, gamers going on in the game room, that our internet's not going to shut down.
Okay.
So
for the buffer. Got it.
Yeah, and they upgraded other parts of the system that, you know, really made that happen. And that's a significant investment, you know, for any company. And then they provided some operating support to support our programs, which was phenomenal. You know, I mean, they've just been I've been on the other side as a grants officer and someone who represented a company, which at that time it was General Mills, but they're doing it right. And I can't say that about most, you know, Comcast, Mortensen, Microsoft, philanthropies, they're really thinking differently about how to really engage with not just the community, but organizations that really need that kind of support in the community to make things happen.
Yeah, I would second that. Comcast has been a good partner and has been really on the sort of thought edge of this. So they're thinking bigger than just what they do. You know, they're thinking about the community. You know, they're a business, but they're thinking about the community, and they have the right people.
Right, right.
Yeah, see, that's key, right?
Right.
The right people make such a big difference because it's people that understand how to connect with people in communities. That's the bottom line, you know.
And it's the people on the ground doing the work, like you too. We wouldn't be able to get to that next part of the conversation without having you two in the room to sit like, okay, well, this is how this is impacting me. This is how it's working over here. And let's put our best practices together, right? The other piece of that, so we got the partners, we're talking government, and the tech in me loves all of this because, you know, I'm a digital media director. So that's my day job. I play on computers. That's all I do is on computers. Literally, it's on a computer. I got you. But we're talking, if we're looking at parents, right? We're looking at educators who on the other side, who may or may not know how to get into these rooms in these conversations, but they have this need. They see what the kids need, right? How can they get into this conversation? Where do they go? How do they begin to impact or affect change where they are?
I mean, I think that's still a good question. And I wouldn't say that I have a great answer. I mean, I know, you know, from the perspective of adult education, we have a hotline that people can use to get access to programming. you wonder, there's so many people out there, again, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the population who are lacking in the skills around this. So there's a lot of people, and you wonder where they are, right? Where are they trying? Are they trying to access these programs? I think they are, but I don't think there's very many programs. I can tell you from our perspective, we do some direct service on the ground with adults, many who have children, right? Generally speaking, English is a second language population. When COVID hit, we had to go immediately to virtual. And this is a population that's fairly low income, newer immigrants, refugees, don't speak the language very well yet, did not have computers, did not have internet. It was very, very, very difficult to get that going. We spent a year getting people computers and getting people all these skills and so on. And there's other groups that, if you're working with a population that's getting ready for college or something, some of those populations just jumped right on their computer and were ready to go. So it varies dramatically depending on your situation. I'm hoping that we can get to a point by the end of this year or early next year where there is things like hotlines where people can call and ask, figure out where to get help, because right now I don't know, honestly. I mean, if somebody knows about Wilder or the different programs that have availability, they'll go to those programs. But if they don't know about it, I don't know what they'll do.
I think it also is requiring us to think differently about how we connect with people. So we do trauma-informed services for adults who are court ordered to come and do our programs. And so if they come to us, part of what we have to do is an assessment to say, where are you? What kind of support do you need? Where are you with finding a job? What kind of skills are you looking to improve upon? So we've got to do it. We've got to think about it differently versus just doing the counseling in the groups versus saying, no, I mean, if we're going to really do wraparound services, we got to wrap it around really. And then that means that we've got to be more thoughtful and intentional about the assessments that we do for everybody coming in, as well as with our Child Development Center, even with those parents. So we just recently hired someone that's all that person will do is engage with parents and speak with the parents about, how can we support them? And I'll just use a quick example. One of the parent, his wife died in a car accident, unexpectedly, of course. And little girl was less than 3 years old. And he was traumatized. And he didn't even know how to accept help. So he was so angry, and he eventually pulled his daughter out, but then he came back and said, I just was not ready. And he didn't have a job. He didn't know how he's going to pay his rent. And we were going to help him do all of that, find a job, figure out how we can help him pay his rent. But he was not having it. He just was not in the right space. So it took him leaving and then us just staying in contact. That's all we did. We didn't pressure him or anything else. We said, if we're here, if you need us. And then he came back. He was gone about 2 months. He came back literally 2 weeks ago. And now we're working with him to do that. But it just, we've got to just think about how we're going to re-engage with people, differently and quite frankly, where they are. And I know that's kind of one of those cliché statements, but literally everybody's in different places.
You got to take the fear out of it.
Even in the staff at Phyllis Wheatley, I have, access to really good internet. I don't have problems with that. I told you about one of our staff members that had spotty internet. So we're trying to conduct meetings virtually, and she's dropping off every 2 minutes. It will drive you crazy. But
you see, I'm blurry right now. Look.
Yeah, right.
Dallas. Thank you, Dallas.
You got to look at, how do you pivot and then offer your same programming that you would normally do in person. Mm-hmm. And then when you bring people back, is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be back in person? What do you do? How do you keep your building sanitized so you're spreading anything? So there's a lot of things that as not a nonprofit, you got to think about a little differently than we would have otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's a lot of interest and need out there, and I think people are struggling to figure out where to go and what to do. Just a small example. A few years back, the St. Paul Public Library came to us and said, we have a lot of people coming to the library asking for, like, how do I do internet? How do I do Word? And so they said, is there some way you guys could come up with an assessment so that we can do a quick assessment of these people to see what needs they need to work on, right? We said, yeah, we can either find one or figure it out. So we went and looked around, and there wasn't one. It didn't exist. And so we said, okay, we'll develop something. So we put something together with the help, I think, Bremer Foundation and a few others, and put it online, thinking that we'll use this in St. Paul and for our little literacy programs in the libraries in St. Paul, right? And now 9 years later, we've given 6 million assessments worldwide.
Wow.
Because there was this monstrous need out there that programs all over the place were looking for. How do I figure out what people need when they're coming and asking for things? So libraries, workforce systems, community colleges, literacy programs, even some businesses, and they're all having these people come and not have the skills they need to do their jobs or to use the library or to use their teleport, for help. And so they take this assessment, and now there's curriculum involved in it, and there's also some online learning that can happen with it, and it's just being used. It went like hotcakes. So there's clearly something's happening, and there's a lot of good things. I mean, these are programs all over the place that are using it, but a lot of Minnesota programs too. Clear need for these skills, and clearly people are looking for help.
And this continued education piece, thinking about, I know when people like, well, I went to school, I'm smart, but it's not about not being smart. It's about technology changed in 6 months. Even your computer that you got 6 months ago is obsolete.
It updates every couple of minutes.
Right. So it's staying on top and bringing people into the fold. So one, understanding that they do need some assistance, but also not making them feel stupid for needing assistance, and then taking the fear out of what that is for when they do begin to engage in learning.
I hope so. I hope so. And I think that's true. I can't say that for sure because I'm not in that position, but I don't think people feel that not understanding like how to use Word makes you stupid. I don't know.
Some people do.
Maybe some people do, but I also think that with literacy, we've always had this long stigma where people don't want to come to a program because somebody will find out that they're not literate, right? That's been a long-standing issue that we've had in our field for decades and forever. I don't know for sure that's the same case with digital issues. It's a little different. These are additional skills that people are gaining, right? So I'm hoping. I think it can be portrayed as something. No, you're just gaining some additional skills to get this job that you want, right?
The other thing too is what we're seeing is the importance of also helping the more senior community with some of the basic skills as well. And I'll use my parents as an example. My father still has a flip phone and keeps it in his glove compartment. So he doesn't want to do anything. That's just for emergency purposes. But my stepmother, now she has an iPhone, and now she's learning that she can text now. She was so excited that she could text. I'm just like, I'm so glad, you can text me. But it's, but she was so excited. But what we're seeing, even when we do COVID testing and the vaccinations at our site, and there's a senior high-rise close to us, and a lot of them had no clue. Calling our hotline or trying to figure out how to go online and set up, an appointment, they had no clue. So what we're finding is that the seniors need support as well, because in cases of emergency, there's all kinds of, issues around that for them, that if they have newer technology and they know how to use even something as simple as an iPhone for us, but for them, it's a scary device, right?
Challenge. Yeah. I think your mom needs to teach my mom.
No, but the access for seniors was a huge issue at the beginning of the vaccine distribution because they were the first ones to be able to, and they could not go online to see if they could access
Right.
it.
You know, and that's perfect. That's a perfect example of our situation, right? That online form that you needed to fill out to get your vaccine, very complicated, not written in ways that made sense for different communities, for people who were not digitally literate. There was all kinds of input put into that. They didn't listen, and it was a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Forever. And when are we going to learn this? This was a perfect opportunity, and we blew it.
Well, even now, I mean, when you do your test, you have to go online and have somebody watch you do this. If you have a saliva test,
Right.
They actually have to watch you do it.
You have to do virtual, right?
And so if you don't know how to get on a computer, let alone go on Zoom, and then try to figure out how you're going to be able to do all that and then have somebody watch you. I mean, just think about that for, somebody 75, 80 years old is trying to do. I mean, no.
Tap out.
No,
They tapped
hard.
out. My mom has a little button for Zoom, and she's like, I was on here, and then she went away because she closed the screen. She didn't get that. She's like,
We could go on and on.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
right.
It's
But it's not just our moms, though, right? It's also our friends. And younger folks, and I think that's where we come back into this conversation that Eric was talking about before. It doesn't look like who you think it would look like. It's everybody.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no
It really doesn't.
there's no like type of person. It could be the head of whatever agency to the educator who's like, wait, we got to do what for school? So
I mean,
yeah.
I'm convinced that one of the small silver linings around COVID is that this issue has come to light, and now everyone's talking about it. So it's not undercover anymore. It's clearly an issue that we're talking about and needing to deal with. And there it is. And COVID made that happen. So I don't think it's going to go away.
So the digital equity piece,
Yes, right.
as well as the health equity piece.
Mhm.
Those two, COVID really brought to light the disparities that really exist in the communities.
And sometimes they're interrelated.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. So, I think there will be continued good conversations about this, and we can't let it go away, because as COVID, well, who knows if it's going to go away? I don't know. But if it does go away, we can't let this go away, because otherwise we'll just go back to the old way. And I think we have an opportunity here. We have a really good opportunity here to really make this. We're having a conversation with Hawaii right now about their digital equity initiative in Hawaii. Their workforce system, their state librarian, their ABE system, adult education system, all working together. Their goal is to become 91% digitally literate in Hawaii. And I believe them. They're going to do it. I have no doubt that they're going to do it. They got the right people involved. They have the will to do it. That's what it takes.
Eric,
It's the will. It's the will. I'm telling you.
You know what, Suzanne?
challenge Minnesota right there.
It's the people, Suzanne. It's the people that are doing it. That's what's happening, right?
Eric just challenged Minnesota. That's what I just heard.
He called Minnesota out, right?
I heard it. I heard it loud. Like, look, my internet came back and everything when you said that. Oh my goodness.
We're gonna let Hawaii beat us?
Right, but that's the conversation right now, and I think it's the urgency that you guys are talking about that needs to pull up. Like the community needs to pull up, the organizations need to pull up and be part of that conversation, and then don't wait until after the laws are passed to complain. Be part of the bill making process. Talk to your local, government officials to be part of the actual, for them to sponsor the bill for you, to see how you can be part of that conversation, and to be in their ear and to harass them. Be in their ear. No, definitely. Well, this has been great, you two. I'm excited about this conversation.
No, it's been great.
Thanks for bringing this together. This has been great. It's been great to meet you guys.
And then I hope you two continue conversations after this.
We should, Suzanne, because that platform I was talking about might be useful to you guys.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
my whole thing is I don't need to recreate the wheel or reinvent anything if you've got something that's really working and it makes sense. So, but I'd love to really seriously, talk to you all afterwards about how we could potentially partner and bring a coalition together to really make some of that happen. And Comcast, I think, can, be very pivotal at that around this digital navigator that you mentioned, right? Because that's going to be important.
Yeah, they're talking about funding some of that, so that's really helpful. So I would love to be part of a conversation.
Yeah. Love this.
That would be great.
I love this. So thank you for tuning in, everyone who is tuned in as well. Suzanne E. Burks, she is Executive Director of Phyllis Wheatley Community Center. Please, we're going to drop their information at the bottom for you to connect with them, as well as Eric. Forgive me, I did not ask how to say your name before. Nesheim. Eric Nesheim. He is Executive Director of Literacy Minnesota, and we're also going to drop his information at the bottom as well to connect with these two important organizations for the work that they're doing in connecting digital equity with the community and talking about inclusion and breaking and reducing that digital divide. So I just want to say thank you to, and I look forward to more conversations on this. This is very enlightening.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great to hang out with you guys.
Since 2011, Internet Essentials from Comcast has connected more than 10 million low-income Americans to low-cost, high-speed internet at home. From the beginning, we've designed our program to address the main barriers to broadband adoption head-on, from lack of digital skills to not having functional equipment to the cost of a monthly service subscription. We provide important resources, such as free digital skills training, low-cost computers, and affordable high-speed internet for under $10 a month. We're also on our way to converting 1,000 community centers into Wi-Fi connected lift zones by the end of this year. Whether at home or on the go, we're on a mission to connect even more people in need, including students, families, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. That's why we've committed $1 billion over the next 10 years to reach 50 million people with the education, tools, and resources they need to succeed in a digital world.
People with COVID-19 may feel sick in lots of different ways. If you don't feel well, it's important to tell your parent or a grown-up. You should not come to school. If you're already at school and you start to feel sick, tell your teacher or the school nurse right away. It's okay to say you're not feeling well, and it's important to tell someone so we all can stay safe. If your grown-up has more questions about COVID-19, visit health.mn.gov.